Welcome to the PHNX Wildcats, AZ Wildcats podcast. I am Mike Luke, joined by John Schuster, Brad Alice, as always brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook app, America's #1 sportsbook app. I'm very fortunate enough that you guys can carry me for a second because I just ran about a mile from the stadium, a little flushed. But Arizona wins. Guys, this was an FCS team. I get it. This was not your normal FCS team. This was a good football team here. No apologies. This was a tough, hard-fought win that, honestly, Brad, they showed a lot of fortitude in this game because they could have given up at a lot of different points.
I think this was one of the most entertaining Arizona football games I can remember in quite some time. It was well played, quality on both sides. There were some key ebbs and flows. Every time it looked like momentum was about to get into a position where perhaps a team could go up 2 scores and put the pressure on the opposition, a big mistake or a big play took place on that team, that team's defense, and then that wrested momentum in the other direction. It looked like in the fourth quarter that NDSU's plan was going to work. They were going to be able to wear Arizona down. They were cranking out a lot of very long runs, and the one drive that allowed them to take the lead looked like it was, an indication that things were getting difficult for Arizona. But then they made a questionable play call on 4th and 2, something that we can perhaps discuss a little bit later. Arizona was up to making the play, which is at least as critical, and then controlled the rest of the game. And that was NDSU it's clear to see why they are the best team at their level.
Right.
And as far as what they have and what they do and what their game plan is, they know what they want to do going in. They're generally really good at doing it. They don't beat themselves. And it makes up for the obvious recruiting deficiencies that they have up and down the roster. But in the television broadcast, one of the announcers said that I think it was, I think Sagarin has NDSU ranked somewhere in what would be the middle of the Pac-12. And based on the way they played tonight, I agree with that.
Agreed.
And I think, and the thing is that Arizona, I think, is in that category as well, which is what, based on the win against San Diego State 2 weeks ago, I think it's kind of like maybe what we thought could be. And Arizona, I think, if this is a conclusion to your non-conference slate, the Wildcats played some good programs and certainly appear to be moving in definitely a positive direction. You feel good about where this could go. And by virtue of being 2-1 in non-conference play, can you get to a bowl game? Yeah, maybe. And if you're doing that in year 2, that's a pretty impressive accomplishment.
William?
They did things they normally haven't done over the years. Even going back to Stoops, they made defensive stops late after, and I said this on Twitter, and people, I said I thought there was a chance Arizona got punched in the mouth and didn't recover. They got punched in the mouth and recovered. They made big plays on offense. They came up with timely first downs. They were able to run out the clock, something, again, they've struggled to do throughout the years. And again, I know it's an FCS opponent, but this FCS opponent would win the MAC probably.
Yeah, for sure.
They would,
Okay, if I may, this FCS opponent is good enough to win enough games at Division I to be bowl eligible. They're a good football team.
Yeah.
So this whole thing, they're a factory, and so they've
got 14 guys in the NFL. They got 14 guys in the NFL.
And they have more championships than losses in the last 8 years.
Which is absurd. This is a good program. That's a great program. And it's a really good win for Arizona. And it's possibly a springboard win for Arizona. So while it sounds absurd-ish, based on where Arizona was and where Arizona may be headed, this is a pivotal game that you might look at and say, yeah, that was one of those games early on in the process where things started to come together for the program.
This is a game where it kind of, and again, not even totally different opponent, but this is the Washington State or the Wisconsin game, Stoops' first year. If Arizona wins that, what happens? We'll never know, obviously. But they could have let the San Diego State game get away. Instead, they won going away. Tonight, they could have let this one get away. They didn't. They got a win. They got, again, yes, it's a good football team. It won't look great when we look back in 10 years because no one will remember how good this football team was. But if you get to that 6 wins because of this, if you get to a bowl game, if you're even flirting with a bowl game when, you play ASU, then this is a very important win. And again, I think it's important for a number of things. One, they got knocked down and they got back up. In a game where I thought their speed and athleticism gave them some advantages, it came down to hard-nosed defense and hard-nosed offense that got them the win. They got the stops, and they got that key first down that allowed them to just take a knee. And because of that, that's stuff, again, we have seen Sumlin teams, Rich Rod teams, Stoops teams, Makovic teams not be able to do over the years. And that's how many times would Stoops have beaten USC if he could have gotten one stop?
Right.
It just couldn't. Whether that was USC going down for a game winner or USC just running out the clock. And this team was able to make the play. Credit guys like Jerry Roberts, who was all over the field. Credit Keon Bars, who had that big hit late in the fourth quarter. They made just enough, they made enough plays. And credit to Arizona because, again, I think if you had told any of us 2-1 after the non-conference with a, and Mississippi State, we all seen they're a quality opponent. I think we'd all take it. Now we have taken it, and now let's see what they do with it. They've got 2 very winnable games coming up before that grind of a schedule. And if you're suddenly 4-1 heading into a game with Oregon, we've seen that be a weird game over the years, and that could be a fun one.
I think Barrett Hartman and both of you guys hit the nail on the head as well, too, because the defense looked gassed I don't want to say gassed even, but the defense just looked like it was overpowered for a little, for some of the game, obviously, because of what North Dakota State was doing. But they got the 2 stops that they needed to be able to get in that fourth quarter. And William, like you said before, how many times would a Rich Rod team or, a Stoops team where you would just need to get 1 stop and you just couldn't do it because you were worn down, whatever the case may be? Arizona was able to get that. And again, Arizona's 2-1 coming in out of conference, obviously. And again, I'm sorry, like I said, I just basically ran a mile to get here. But the one thing though, that this team has a certain amount of fortitude to them, because you could tell North Dakota State had been there, done that before. And there were times when Arizona could have gone away, but especially offensively, Jayden de Laura, and we're going to talk about him more, he bounced back. He made some big-time throws. The running game was able to get going. It was really, in a weird way, even though it was an FCS team, and I'm like you guys, this is a team that would win a lot of games in the Pac-12. This is not a game, though, that you take this and you take this one proudly because of how Arizona performed on both sides of the ball.
One thing I really like is how not only de Laura bounced back, but how he learned. He obviously watched the tape. He saw what we saw. A lot of running room. And then late in the game, he even wisely could have run, but I think he saw that it probably wasn't going to amount in first down, so he kept it alive, and he made a couple big throws or a couple near big throws. I think there was the play to, I want to say it was McLaughlin on the sideline. He got shoved out, but that was a dime. I mean, that was right. And McLaughlin came down with it.
The tight end position, by the way, fellas, has been utilized through 3 games. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
And now I will believe that there's going to be a combo forward for the Arizona basketball team because that's the next sign of the apocalypse. But yeah, de Laura clearly, he A, threw better, B, ran when it was good times to run, got down in time, didn't take a big hit that I noticed. And I will admit, I got home at 9:40 and I watched a lot of that game on fast forward. So I'll have to go back and watch some of it and reanalyze. But I know at one point he was 20 of 28. I don't know what he finished at. I don't have it open in front of me. But considering, I think last week, A, he didn't run when he should have. B, he forced some balls, and he just seemed to have a weird hitch to his throwing motion last week. So I don't know if, again, I think we speculated, Mike, on Tuesday that maybe he took a blow and was injured, or at least dinged up. But yeah, I thought he was fantastic. He made plays when he needed to. I'm going to ask Jed Fish to please just rip that Jamari Joyner page out of the playbook?
Please,
Okay,
guys, let's talk about that real quick, because again, there was so much good to take away from this. This is now the third game we've seen this, and each time it does not fool anybody. The second a team comes in, they know exactly what's happening, and this time it could have really come back to bite you because it was a 4th and 2 inside your own, on your side of the field. This isn't fooling anybody. If you're going to play Jamari Joyner, play him at wide receiver. This stupid Wildcat gimmicky thing doesn't need to be done because you already have a good quarterback behind center shoe.
If you were doing this on the DraftKings North Dakota State show, you'd be saying the exact same damn thing.
Right.
North Dakota State lost this game tonight because they went for it 4th and 2 on the Wildcat. Instead of giving the ball to their best player who had 150 total yards on the game and who they couldn't stop. If Arizona stops the best player, pitch him the ball, try to get open space, and then if Arizona makes a play, great. When you go to the backup quarterback and you run the Wildcat, all 11 players on the defense know exactly what you're going to do. This is what should happen. And I don't like legislation, but sometimes there are exceptions. So let's start with an exception. If you call a Wildcat, you get your headphones yanked for the next offensive possession.
Yes.
If you call it again, you get your headphones yanked for the next half. If you call it a third time, you're suspended for at least a game, and fourth time, you should never coach again.
Right.
Okay.
And
one
honestly, if you're going to run it with Speedy.
Don't run it.
And don't run it. But if you're going to run it with Speedy and Coleman and let him hand off every once in a while, because Jamari's kept it every time. I know that one looked like it was supposed to probably be a pass, but yeah, just let's take that page out of the playbook and let's replace it with De Laura designed run. I'm fine with that.
That's fine.
Hand it off to one of your 3.
If you looked at
220-pound running backs
today, everybody who ran the Wildcat in any situation failed. At every level, seemingly in the last 2 or 3 years, once teams have figured out what this is, they're able to stop it. Why coaches insist on running this is just absolutely perplexes me. All right, my rant is done. Let's return to whatever it is you'd like to talk about.
You know what? I also want to give. I want to give some credit for the Arizona ground game, because against Mississippi State, Arizona looked kind of on the defensive, going against that defensive line. It looked at times like that was just a little too quick for them. You had a hard time finding holes. Arizona was able to get big plays on the ground, especially in the fourth quarter when they needed to. And that, again, to me, and some of that was with the freshman and Jonah Coleman. There's just, again, there's a lot to take away from here. There's just a lot. Again, I'm still a little frazzled here, but there's a lot to take away from here, guys. It was just solid stuff, especially on the ground there, Brad.
Absolutely. I thought Arizona ran the ball, effectively. Still not, it's still not going to blow you away necessarily. And, this is a team that's going to have to win on the arm of Jayden de Laura. But if you look at it, Michael Wiley at 5.7 yards per carry, Coleman at 5.3, DJ Williams 4.5. I'll take that. And Luke had 32 yards on 2 carries. That 28 came on 1. So those are good numbers. 165 yards rushing, and that's including the kneel downs. I'll take that. Again, would you like to be a team that can be, 200 on the ground, 300 in the air? Sure, but that's not Arizona. I don't think they have good enough offensive line. But if you can at least keep the other team honest, which is what I think they did tonight, and then grind out key yards. Because remember, I think 2 of the scores in the red zone came off the run, whether that was Wiley's or I think it was Jonah Coleman's. Whether the grinding out those first downs late, getting a couple third down conversions on the ground, that was all important. So again, this is not a great running team. It may not even be a good running team, but it's an opportunistic running team.
But I think Brad has touched on probably what's key for Arizona's offense throughout the rest of the year. Keeping teams honest with the run is going to be pivotal, because I think through 3 games, one of the things we've seen is if de Laura is good, Arizona's good offensively. Right. If he isn't, they aren't.
Right.
And or they aren't as consistent as they need to be. And that may be a statistic that continues throughout the course of the year. As we're well aware, at every level in football, the quarterback on the offensive end is the most important player on the field. You win with good quarterbacks, you struggle if you don't have good quarterbacks. It feels to me like Arizona is even emphasizing that perhaps a little bit more. De Laura is going to be a focal point for every defensive team coming through. In last week's game, Mississippi State did a really good job with athleticism, frustrating him on the front line and making it difficult for him to get into positions that, made him relatively comfortable. He learned from that last week. There are two reasons for that. One is while North Dakota State is excellent for what it does on the front line, it doesn't have Mississippi State talent.
Right.
But there are going to be teams on the roster that have better talent than North Dakota State does, and are probably going to focus their entire defensive scouting report on what it is that they need to do to limit the effectiveness of de Laura. And it's up to de Laura to be effective in that regard, and the coaching staff not to bring in other players and call the Wildcat. But I think that's going to be an interesting give and take, and at times maybe an area of frustration, and at times an area of an element that gives Arizona an opportunity to win some games that perhaps we think they shouldn't. So watching his numbers, I think, is going to be the one parallel we can probably pay a lot of attention to throughout the course of the year, and it will probably align to how well Arizona does game to game.
All right, guys, real quick, let me tell you about Game Time here. Game Time is the hottest new ticketing thing, and it's very good for procrastinators. You can find from concerts to games to whatever you want. This is the place you want to be. Game Time. You can save up to 60% on tickets, and you when you buy tickets last minute, it's great for you procrastinators out there. And if you love PHNX, then you love Game Time. The best way to support us is by buying your tickets through the link in the description. Check that out. And Tap and Bottle. All of the away games, we're going to be having viewing parties there. Great place downtown, Scott and Rebecca. They got Four Peaks beers there. They got other things on tap as well. Come join other Wildcat fans, and we'll be down there next Saturday. A little bit of a hint. I have it on good authority that Uncle Kev is going to be down here in October, and I'm going to hold him to this, as he said that I could. So pretty cool stuff right there. Okay. Now, Arizona 2-1. Like I said, going into the season, Arizona over/under on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX, was 3 wins. Guys, again, I look at this schedule right now, and we're going to get back to the North Dakota State game, and we're going to get to all of your comments here because lots of really good stuff. But this again feels to me, watching this team, this feels like about a 6-win team, or 5 or a 6-win team. I think Vegas got it wrong when it came to Arizona, and I think that they're going to be able to I think that Arizona is going to make some real progress here in the second year of Jedd Fisch.
Well, it's about damn time that Vegas got it wrong, because they've been taking our money the last 2 years in the concluding era of Sumlin and Fisch's first year last year. So turnabout is finally fair play in that regard. But yeah, Arizona looks to me like a team that is bowl good enough. They can be bowl eligible. They can get to 6. Colorado should be a given. Colorado's a debacle, and this is going to be hard for me to say, might be worse than Arizona was last year.
That's a win. That should be a win for Arizona.
And that's win number 3. California offensively just doesn't look that impressive to me. And yeah, they were close in the Notre Dame game, but Notre Dame isn't impressive either. So I'm not sure that what hanging with Notre Dame is the moral victory that it should have been. I'm not impressed with their quarterback play or their performance on the offensive side. Now you're going on the road and you're playing a Pac-X team. So can you be in trouble? Can you be off your game a little bit? Can you be reading the headlines after this victory? You can do all of those things and maybe lay an egg. But I think Arizona, and I feel like a lot of people feel the same way here. This isn't actually breaking ground by any stretch. But I think folks now believe that Arizona has a real chance to go 4-1 before you're staring at and I don't remember the exact order, but an Oregon team that was impressive, a Washington team that looked dominant, and an SC team that simply took care of business. Those look like 3 opponents that Arizona will struggle against. And then if Arizona's 4-3 on the back end, hopefully you've got enough in there where you can get some things done, including what happened up the road in Tempe tonight. You're talking about smaller conference teams coming through. Eastern Michigan didn't just upset ASU. They were the better team by far throughout the course of that game. And now this is the one thing I was kind of curious about with ASU. Lost a lot of players. They've been in a lot of controversy. If they had one thing go wrong, was the whole thing going to crumble? And I was surprised that they looked as good the first week. Granted, it's against NAU. And then we're in the game for a while against Oklahoma State, and tonight looked terrible. So now you're talking about, I remember 2 weeks ago, I think I heard a lot of people saying how ASU was so much more talented than Arizona, and I was kind of surprised by that. And now, based on 3-game performances, and especially tonight, you look at that rivalry matchup and think Arizona's got an excellent opportunity. So that's maybe 5 wins, and now you're trying to figure out what else you can pluck there, and I think they're on the schedule.
Does this team, let me ask you this, guys, from just watching this U of A team, does it look a little bit more physically? I don't want to say imposing, that's not the right term, but does it look a little bit more physically impressive on the defensive line than it has in years past? Not really.
They got a lot of work.
I will say this. I think they have athletes there.
I'd agree with that.
And I think they're I think the problem is I think you're lacking enough Pac-12 starting defensive linemen there, but you got a lot of guys who can play in the Pac, if that makes sense. So, how many schools is Keon Barr starting at? Probably not many in the Pac-12, but he's in the rotation alum, but he's a star for Arizona. Or close to, Paris Shand. I think the 2 ends are pretty good. But I think that interior defensive line, it's kind of like we used to say with Arizona's, I used to say this when we used to do the radio with Shu, that Arizona always seemed to lack a game breaker, a number 1 threat. Right. They had a lot of 2s, 3s, and 4s. And I think that's it. They don't have, frankly, an all Pac-12 quality defensive lineman, but they a lot of guys, but they're also not playing a walk-on out there. They're not playing an NAU type guy, although they picked up one yesterday. They're legit Pac-12 players. They're just all slotted up 1 or 2 spaces, probably too many.
And I think, Mike, this is kind of the thing that you're talking about in terms of what is Arizona. Arizona went from a terrible football team last year that didn't have the talent on the front line to compete to being probably roughly a 6-6 football team this year that does have better athleticism, that can compete, but is going to struggle against better offensive lines. And there are better offensive lines in this conference and remaining on the schedule. Based on what I saw today, I look at Utah being a problem. So go back to imagine if the old Stanford was on the schedule. What would happen with this Arizona front line? It'd be ugly. So I suspect that against really good competition, the upper echelon of this league, a lot of those teams are going to have success on the ground. And that's clearly the probably priority area where Arizona needs to improve. And frankly, if you wanted to go up and down the list of every other 6-6 team in Division I college football, that would probably be the area where they wanted to improve to.
You mentioned game breakers right there, and I think it's an interesting point there because it feels when Arizona has the ball offensively, and again, last year was, even by Arizona standards, was really bad offensively, and you guys especially have seen some really bad Arizona quarterbacking over the years. But this year it feels that if Arizona gets down 7 or if it gets down 10, and again, this is only 3 games, I get that, but it feels like Arizona is still in the game. It feels with de Laura, it feels like with those receivers, with a tight end game, Uncle Kev would be going crazy right now. It feels like, though, that they can move the ball down the field and they can get points without being fluky, which is another reason that I don't want to see the Wildcat anymore. Arizona is so far past that stage, I think, with the talent level that it has, that you don't need to be doing that. And I think that you just watch them, though, and it feels like Arizona can be in a game when they're down 10, and I haven't thought that in 4 or 5 years, to be honest with you.
I would say this. I feel like in this game, I think was very indicative of this. Jed Fish has brought an NFL offense, and this game and several of the games, it felt like NFL games. What was it? I want to know how many possessions there were tonight. I know at one point I think there were 5. I think each team had 5 possessions in the first half.
It's not that many.
I think they had 6 or 7 in the second half. That's NFL stuff. So I agree with you, Mike. I think they can rally from 10. That might be the number, though. I don't think, unlike Rich Rod, who could figure out how to run 80 plays.
Right.
Some of the maybe Foles area Stoops teams could rally from 17. I think you can rally from 10. I'm not sure they can get off the field on defense and move the ball in big chunks enough to rally from much more. The good news is, yeah, they can rally from 10 because last year's team couldn't rally or vary it. So I think it's I don't think it's an explosive enough offense for huge comebacks, but I think it's an efficient enough offense for small comebacks and to be able to keep you in the game.
I'm not sure I agree with that entirely. I might split hairs a little bit. I don't have any of those to do. You and Brad are well equipped in that department. But this is a very unique game tonight. The entire Bison strategy is run the football, milk clock, beat you up, dominate you in the fourth quarter. They limit possessions. In college football, most teams don't do that. And I think most of the teams that Arizona sees aren't going to do that. The key, which is pretty obvious, I think, is that Arizona has to get teams off the field defensively on some sort of consistent basis. Right. So if they can do that, then I think there's reason to believe that they have enough personnel where they could rally from 14 or 17 or something like that. And because while Fish plays an NFL-style offense, give or take, the college game overall isn't laid out like an NFL game, so you get almost 2 times as many possessions. This was a very unique game in that regard because of the way that the opponent effectively played. But I think a lot of times you'll get, with clock stoppages and stop to move the chains and any of a number, and it's the reason the college football games last 3 hours and 45 minutes. You get more possessions in those matchups. And as a result, I think you maybe have an opportunity. And I think offensively, Arizona might have the personnel to string some offensive possessions together. The key when you're in those sorts of situations is, can they do enough on the defensive end consistently to give the offense that kind of opportunity if they get down?
And what they've been able to do, and maybe this is more of where I should be getting at, and by the way, P-Posh, my guy, one of my favorite people out there, said this was like beating a BYU roster of 23-year-old dads who have been playing together for years. Very impressive and a little surprising in the way that they were able to do it. The one thing, too, you got to give them, fellas, defensively, Arizona is forcing turnovers now. You've got 6 or 7 turnovers now through 3 games. You had, I think there were 7 or 8 turnovers forced all of last season, and these have been huge. I mean, the turnover that was forced today was a big time.
The Eccles turnover was one of the 2 or 3 most important plays of the game.
Exactly, and that was something that this Arizona just hasn't had in what? I mean, I can't even really remember the last time that Arizona was consistently forcing turnovers. And again, I don't want to make it out like this is the 85 Chicago Bears, but it gives you a little bit more margin for error when you know that, okay, they can probably get a forced fumble. They can get an interception. They can get something there. And William, we haven't seen that in recent years.
No, and again, that's been important. Nansen's, said he wanted to come in and create turnovers. And as much as I hate turnover props, this team seems to love it. And it's important. I think the 2 things that's been missing from Arizona football that, again, for any of us who were around in the 90s and even the 80s, turnovers and sacks. And they're still not a great sack team, but being able to get those turnovers, being able to make key stops has been very important. I just did some research. I'm going to go back to what I said. This team can't score quickly, though. They have 1 touchdown drive of less than 6 plays, and most of it 8 to 10, and that was a 4-yard one. But
okay, and how much time was taken off the clock on those 8-play drives?
4 to 5 minutes.
Do a little bit more research on that, and then come back, and we'll see how close they ultimately are. I think there's an opportunity to believe that they can still, hey, maybe we'll find out.
And I will say this: I'll grant this: if de Laura starts connecting on that long ball, it's a whole different game. Right now, he is not connected on me.
And he's had Cowing, especially today. He had him on that 60-yard pass over the middle where he, things like that break a game open.
I would suggest, generally speaking, that it's up to Now, obviously, you don't want to get down 17, but for maybe we do, because I feel like I'm up against it a little bit here, hoping that I can get one right, which is rare enough based on the way I played on the DraftKings app today.
Code word PHNX.
But I think most importantly in that regard is that the defense is going to have to consistently make stops to give the offense opportunities to see whether they can come back in those regards, and that's obviously a growth process that takes place. I think so. I think Arizona's offense, I think, generally can be pretty good. De Laura is obviously the key in regards to that, and you hope that we don't have an opportunity where Arizona's down 10 or 17 to see whether Shu is full of crap and Brad, as usual, knows exactly what he's talking about. But one of the things that concerns me defensively here is that if you are reliant solely on forcing turnovers, eventually that's going to catch up to you, and you're going to give up a lot of points as a result of that on the games that you aren't able to force turnovers. So it's a great momentum stat. It's huge, and the sword cactus thingamabobby thingy is fantastic. And if anyone complains about that, shut the bleep up. That thing's fantastic. Right. And it's a great marketing addition to the team on the sidelines. But if you're relying solely on turnovers, that's eventually going to be a problem, because good teams aren't going to turn the ball over. And when they don't, then you're going to have to figure out other ways to make stops.
You know what's funny? Well, I'll tell you what. Let me just tell you there again about my DraftKings pick of the week. Now, a lot of people might not care about my DraftKings pick of the week, but I have to contractually read it. So here's the deal. You put down right now, I liked Arizona to win this game, and I liked Arizona to win this game straight up. Now, you might say to yourself, Mike, what else do you have? This game is already over right now.
Mike, what else do you have? This game's already over.
So here's the deal. You can put down $5 on these NFL games tomorrow. Just $5. We're going to see who has bigger hands. And then I don't want to turn this into a political debate, but and then get $200 in free plays. That's simple, that easy. And here's where it gets even cooler. If your team is up 10, you automatically win. Now, you might say to yourself, Mike, where could I find this deal?
Mike, where could I find this deal?
The DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. And again, you just got to download the Sportsbook. You put that in, and that's promo code PHNX. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions do apply. See show notes for details. We're all going to do that. Schuster's actually hiding his flip phone right now, pretending that he actually has the current phone right here. Let's make fun of ASU for a minute, because I was only able to watch that a little bit because I was up in the press box. But I'll tell you one thing, guys, and I know that Arizona is not
the only person in anywhere in the entire Southwest region who thinks being in the press box is a VIP occurrence.
Oh, I know, right? Well, I do like the getting free food out of it. But I'll tell you one thing. I'll tell you one thing.
They still have the tasty cookies.
They do have the tasty cookies, and they have the brownies, by the way, as well.
Brad. Also, by the way, I meant to ask you: were you at the game tonight?
No, I was coaching baseball.
Okay. Because very nice.
Very
because
cool.
Last week
Rallied
I know that you mentioned. I know that you mentioned that the viewing experience was problematic, and I was wondering if they had fixed that this game. I wanted to get to that last weekend because you had mentioned it in the text, and I didn't have an.
And I didn't make it on the show because I suck.
Yeah. That's all right. It'll be.
I will say this:
maybe another thing for another time.
They corrected some of the PA issues midway through the game. It was literally the bass was so bad and so off balance.
Right.
I would say I almost had to leave. Like, it hurt my ears of it. Now, I was under the cover, so I don't know if things were just echoing. My dad had to turn his hearing aids off. I mean, we have a marching band. Please use them, and please let's not have it. Really, Mike, I'm going to age Shu and I. Shu, remember like the '80s with the mini trucks, the neon mini trucks that all had just like 85 subwoofers in the back.
Yeah, with the with the sweet KC lights.
Yeah, and you know how they rattled at stoplights?
I do remember that.
That's what the stadium sounded like.
Oh, that's a problem.
I could not hear the announcers. I could not hear, except I could hear. I think it's our friend Jeff Dean.
Mm-hmm.
I could hear him saying third down, but other than that, couldn't hear. The officials couldn't hear him. By the third quarter, it was better. But I mean, why are we playing? And look at the people voting. I know we're old people, but they voted for a Earth, Wind, and Fire song as the song, and then they played Journey, and the Journey worked cool. The app worked really well.
Okay,
But,
apologies for the and apologies for the tangent, Mike, to contractually provide you with whatever obligation you need. Indy against Jacksonville tomorrow.
Indy. Okay, what do you got, William? Oh, well, I was going to say the Chiefs have already played. Cardinals, Raiders. Who do you want off the top of your head?
Based upon what I saw in Glendale last week, give me the Raiders.
Figured
I was not the Cardinals just so bad. It reminded, speaking of the 80s and mini trucks, it kind of reminded me of some of those games at Sun Devil Stadium.
Right. Now but think about it this way though, guys. Arizona right now is at I don't know. Feels like about a 5 or a 6 win team, maybe bowl, maybe not quite.
Which Arizona team are we talking about? The Cardinals or the Wildcats?
No. Excuse me, the Arizona Wildcats. Correct.
Okay.
We're certainly not talking about ASU.
No.
Well, but have you seen something where it seems like, and again, Arizona hasn't reached that peak Arizona Wildcats, but it really does feel like these two programs are headed in drastically different directions. I mean, you just look last year. Arizona wins one game, and let's be honest here, that was a game that it was only because California didn't have its team didn't show up. ASU goes into this year, they lose 30 transfers. They have, and a lot of them went off to good schools, and you don't really know what's going to go on with their sanctions, what's going on with Herm Edwards. So they have all these Band-Aid approaches. They're 1-2. And like you guys said, I was watching it. I wasn't watching it as closely as maybe you guys were, but I was watching it on my laptop. And the thing was crazy, if you're an ASU fan, is that Eastern Michigan, it didn't look like this was much of a fluke. I mean, Eastern Michigan looked like they could play Arizona State 10 times and win quite a few of them.
They controlled the game. And their rushing numbers, I think, were well over 200 yards. If you're giving up 200 yards at home against an inferior opponent, you've got problems. Mm-hmm. And it looks to me like ASU's problems are catching up to them. So, it's great that you scored a bunch of points against NAU, but now you're playing slightly different competition in conference games from here on out. And it may be where, and I guess they don't even do I keep thinking they do the geographic designations anymore. I don't know what the hell the PAC-X is doing anymore. But if you were doing this in an old style, what used to be the side of the conference with the two LA schools, ASU, Utah, and Colorado, I think you're looking at some order of USC and Utah at the top of that group. And then in that second group, you're looking at some order of UCLA and Arizona. And on the bottom part of the group, you're looking at some order, probably ASU's better than Colorado. So if Arizona's moved into third or fourth, and let's give UCLA, I guess, the benefit of the doubt, although they were not impressive today at home. Let's say UCLA's third for sake of conversation. That's a winnable game on the schedule for Arizona. And I think the Cats at the very least, I think more often than not, the rest of this year are going to be competitive for 60 minutes. And they're going to give themselves opportunities to win. Are there better teams on the schedule? Yeah. Are those teams going to be able to cause problems for de Laura and disrupt Arizona offensively? Probably. But I think Arizona is going to perform well, which competitively throughout the course of most of this year. And considering where this program has been, that is a quick improvement. And obviously from a Wildcat fan standpoint, not just tonight, which was a legitimate win despite the name of the team across from you and the division that they play. I think, Arizona's clearly moving in a good direction. And for Wildcat fans, they have to be thrilled about that.
Shoot, let me ask you this, because Brad and I obviously follow recruiting. You hate recruiting. So I
really do. I've hated recruiting for now 2 millennia.
You got to see Mike Bibby in person. That's how fun.
I have, yes.
But let me ask you this though, and then I'll give.
Well, when Shu was scouting the Philistine recruits, that's where
everything went wrong. I got
he gave Goliath 3 stars, and
I did, and boy did that come back and slam me in the head a few times.
All right, let me ask you this though. Just watching it, because last year you and I joked a little bit back and forth. It was kind of a joke, kind of a not. You weren't too impressed by Jed Fish's, what he did last year.
No.
Again, we're
Not
only
on the field.
I get it,
Okay.
I come in peace. I have no problems with what you say.
And Dolph Lundgren, yes.
Yes, I come in peace.
Boy, is that a hell of a reference. Anyway, go ahead.
But let me.
You don't know what that reference was,
no,
but
I have
nevertheless,
no clue.
please go ahead.
By the way, I've had 2 people say bring back the beard. I will bring back the beard this winter. I promise. Tina, by the way, I'm back in the A, and I'm thrilled.
You looked really good with your beard on Amazon Prime during that Chiefs game.
Oh my God! Now I do get that reference. I do get that reference.
It's magic.
Wow. Yes. Anyway, Mike, what were you about to ask recruiting wise?
Look, I just wanted to ask you though.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, what were you about to ask recruiting wise?
Just from somebody that doesn't follow the recruiting and the ins and outs per se.
Mm-hmm.
How glaring is the talent differential just in 1 year and what Jedd Fisch has had to do from what you and I watched last year to what you're watching right now?
Let me show you how glaring as opposed to saying how glaring. It's that glaring. So Arizona okay, hold on. This is Arizona recruiting wise last year. This is Arizona recruiting wise this year. Much better. Well, unless you really don't want to see me, then maybe it's much worse. But hopefully that helped.
Right. But so it's glaring.
So yes, Arizona has better talent. Arizona clearly has better talent. They're a heck of a lot more competitive, and what they've been able to do in a year and an off season has been nothing short of remarkable.
Just look at how many new players are on the field tonight. And that includes the transfer portal. Okay.
Well, you look at it. You look at it, Brad. The skill position players are totally revamped. You got a new quarterback. All your receivers are new. You got new running backs. A lot of the line is kind of a holdover. I get that. But heck, even on the defensive side, Hunter Echols and he's only here 1 year, which is kind of a bummer. But he's also a guy, though, that was able to, he's been a big time player. I think Fisch has a recruiting prowess that I think is going to be able to continue to bring people in as long as they continue to win.
Well, and I would be anxious to see, because I will say this: he's hit or miss in the transfer portal. Obviously, this year it looks a lot better, and last year sometimes it's who you can get. I would be curious to see if other teams are his hit or miss, because he picked up. I think the odds of seeing Drake Anderson play meaningful snaps is done. I think the kid they got this year from UCLA, the safety, is not going to see the field.
Right.
They didn't really get an offensive lineman. That being said, Jayden de Laura, Jacob Cowing, McLaughlin.
Tanner McLaughlin.
It goes back last year, but Jerry Roberts. So there's been some very good pickups. And maybe it's just maybe even the transfer portal is a lot like JC recruiting. It's so hit or miss. Because I'll be honest, I was not expecting much out of Hunter Echols because he couldn't do it at USC.
Right.
He's been great.
He's been fantastic.
Although, that being said, I was also expected more out of Rutherford because he was getting meaningful snaps at Notre Dame, and he just doesn't look great. So I think it's an interesting thing where you have to be efficient in the portal. Luckily, he's expanded. You're not stuck to the 25 recruits. So that'll give you some benefit to take some chances on guys. But I think you look at it and you combine these 2 years, and I think there was a lot of filler last year. But the bulk of the guys making plays are guys who've been brought in the last 2 years.
A question. I'm sorry, Mike. I didn't mean to step on you.
No, go ahead.
Do you guys have any read or is there any updated information on Harris? I know that Harris was injured and it looked like it may have been a shoulder thing, and I don't know if he played again. So I was wondering if there was some information on that, because if he isn't able to play or if that's a long-term injury of some degree, that's obviously something that's not going to be good news for the defense.
Right. If
he's okay, that would be great. I just haven't heard.
Right. The only one I know that looked like he could have a real injury, and again, I can't speak on that, is Speedy Luke. He was on crutches after the game, so I don't really. Let's see here. Harris came back into play again, so yeah.
Okay, all right,
we're good on that.
All right, fantastic. Thanks.
We have an army of people checking, fact checking, and then helping us out when we need. That's
Folks, thank you out there for that.
That's how cool everything is. Now, let me ask you this then. Well, let me tell you about Four Peaks. Four Peaks Brewery, very good brew. Yes, put it up there. Wave me up. Four Peaks Brewery, all kinds of good stuff. They're having an Arizona Cardinals watch party tomorrow. You should go there, hang out with them. Good peeps there, all kinds of good stuff right there. And you, again, great beer. I've gotten into Four Peaks. I like it. And again, you can go in there, raffles, all kinds of fun stuff, viewing party. Check it out right there. All right. Wow. And again, I did not do a good job of getting to the comments. I promise that I'm going to do a better job next week. I'm still kind of tired from running here. But guys, before we sign off here, what are your thoughts through the out of conference schedule here and where Arizona goes? You got California, you got Colorado coming up next. Where does everything lay with you guys right now? And where is it from where you were hoping to see before the season started?
I'll go. I think I think it's hard to be disappointed about where Arizona is at this stage. First off, and some of this is out of their control, and some of this worked out happened to work out well. I think this was an excellent non-conference schedule for Arizona. Mm-hmm. You're playing and you're willing to take on, and certain things work out. And I know schedules are worked way in advance, which is its own level of absurdity, but nevertheless, you played a San Diego State team on the road, whereas while down this year, that's an 11-win program for most of the last few years. That's an excellent program and a great team to have on your schedule. Then you welcome a legitimate SEC program into town, and you're going to give that back, obviously, in the future. But that's a great game for the fan base. And then you bring in the premier program from one level down into your venue. As confusing or convoluted as that may have been, that's outstanding. So you had the benefit of the schedule work your way, and you took advantage of it. And you feel like Arizona's a team with momentum. Is Arizona a team with 8-win momentum? You're probably asking a lot, but they're good enough to be competitive week in and week out. You feel like that's the case based on the 3 games that you've seen, even as frustrating as Mississippi State was to a large degree. And I think we're going to talk about our share of at least good Arizona performances and probably a heck of a lot more wins than we have in post-game formats in recent memory.
I think they're ahead of schedule. I think most of us would have been kind of happy with 1 and 2. You dominated San Diego State. You played very well tonight. And if you play a clean game last week, it might have come down to a final possession. They played a very sloppy, obviously, game. But even that being said, we all knew Mississippi State was probably the best of the 3. I think it remains to be seen how good they are. They had a weird one today where they were trading punches with LSU and then kind of looked like, I don't see how it happened, but they fell apart late and lost by 2 touchdowns. But yeah, Arizona, I would say based upon the eyeball test, I think there are 2 teams who are head and shoulders above Arizona on the rest of the schedule, and that's Utah and USC.
Yeah.
I think Washington's very intriguing. I'm still not sure how good they are, but there's a chance they're really good. Oregon's pretty good. Rest of the games look, reasonably like toss-ups.
Right.
Ironically enough, Washington State may be the best of them, but I'm still not even sure about that. Now what you have to do is you have to try to steal these next 2. Cal's going to be tough because it's on the road and they look solid. And then you got to really at least find one in that weird middle. 5? That's
right.
Real 5 really good teams. And then you hope again. You got Washington State and you got ASU, and ASU might be a complete dumpster fire as opposed to a small dumpster fire like they are now.
The only games I look at and I say to myself, man, that's going to be a really, really difficult game to win, i.e. you're probably not going to win USC and Utah. Those other games, again, I know Oregon's talented, but I also saw what Georgia did. Granted, Arizona's not Georgia. I get that. But Washington, Wazoo, UCLA, Colorado, ASU, these are winnable games. And this is something where Arizona didn't have that last year. So, but yeah, again.
It will be interesting to see. Last year, Arizona played a really good Utah team, really tough. And it'll be interesting if Utah is Jed Fish's USC was for Stoops. Remember, Stoops, with the exception of that first year, always played USC tough.
Right.
I think he only beat him once. But does Jed Fish have the formula for Utah, or did Utah just come in and mail it in last year and still got out with the win? So I'm interested because on paper, that looks like a nightmare because they do everything
exactly
North Dakota State does, except
only a lot better.
And they have a quarterback. But again, last year they were that same team on paper, and Arizona had a chance to win that football game. So it'll be interesting. But again, if you can go 4-1, and then even if you do drop 5, you're still a very interesting, fun team heading in those last couple football games.
And the place you're going to want to go for that is the DraftKings Sportsbook app, code word PHNX. Like I said, take the over. Just keep taking the over, back the A. But again, everybody out there, can't thank you enough. Hundreds and hundreds of comments. I'll do a much better job of getting to all of those next week. Still kind of tired. I got to go back and get my car now. But Schuster, Brad, as always, really appreciated. This show doesn't go without you guys. So again, I can't thank you guys enough.
You're welcome.
All right. On that note, everybody out there, have a great rest of your evening. Back the A. We'll be back with you next week. You've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.